Welcome back, everyone, to yet another beautiful, new, amazing, excellent episode of Tevora Talks. I am your host, Cash, joined as always by my co-host and partner in cybercrime, Clayton Rhiness. Clayton, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Good to be here again.
Thanks for coming back and having a nice conversation with me. And Clayton, we have an awesome special guest here with us today. He is none other than the Chief Technology Officer at one of the coolest softwares I use all the time, Snyk. His name is none other than Mr. Danny Allan. Danny, welcome to Tevora Talks. How are you, sir?
Thank you, Cash. Super excited to be part of Tevora Talks. Big,
I,
big day and excited to have the conversation.
I am excited also for the conversation today. I'm very grateful to have you here with us. Before we really dive into our fun conversation for today, I wanted to give our little listeners a little insight of who is Danny, and Danny, how did you get to where you are in tech today? What brought you into security and to get to Chief Technology Officer at Snyk?
That's a long story, but I guess it all is underscored by curiosity. I love to figure out how things work and then how they break. And actually, if you go way back, it was I suppose 30 years ago now. I was going to university, and my friend bet me that I couldn't break into the university systems, and so he gave me a challenge, and I do exactly that. So I found a vulnerability, and I went to them. I told them they had this problem, and they hired me. So that is how I got into the security space. And
That's that's awesome. What was the bet? Do you remember the bet?
I don't remember what the bet was. I want to say it was like $20 you can't break in and change your marks. And they had no authentication on this mainframe. You plugged in the Banyan Vines network and you had full access.
That's it, huh? And then the rest is history. That's a good story.
Yeah, those were the days.
Yeah.
That'll land you a job 30 years ago. Today, that might get you arrested. I always say that gave me a job, got me started in the security space, but now you'd probably go to prison if you did that.
Yeah,
So
that's
So
great.
from there, I went to a small startup that was doing security and worked in all kinds of different roles, but always curiosity. How do things work? How should they work? And eventually ended up as CTO of that company. It was called Watchfire. And in 2007, we were bought by IBM. But at that company, I worked in development, I worked in product management, I worked in services, I worked as an SE. I did kind of everything you can imagine. Um, and I've been in security ever since. So after IBM, I did another small startup cloud company, learned all about cloud and how virtualization worked and consumption and all that kind of stuff. That company was bought by VMware. Um, Spent 3 years at VMware and then went to a data protection company, again in the security space. Grew that company from about 400 million to over 1.5 billion in revenue, and then came to Snyk, and here I am
Wow.
today.
There you go. I mean, from what it sounds like, you do like to go down and figure out what works and how it works and what it works. And I think last conversation we've had, we were all talking about, of course, the highlight topic of 2025, AI. How much do you wish that you had a little bit of AI back in the day, since you've had to put your rigors in and do it the manual way all these years?
Well, AI is amazing, obviously, because it automates all those mundane tasks that you used to do in the past. In fact, if you go back to that first job, I remember chaining up all kinds of FPGA chips together to try and cause collisions, hash collisions,
Oh,
to break
interesting.
encryption. But now you could do that with a voice command to AI, and instead of taking weeks to do all this FPGA encryption cracking, you just give it a command, and AI will do it for you.
Yeah, you just give it enough resources and just wait, take a couple sips of coffee. But
Exactly.
But that's interesting, right? I mean, same thing, I obviously don't have as much experience in tech as yourself yet. I'm achieved to hopefully be where you are, same level as Clayton, of course. But yeah, AI is just like a blessing, right? I mean, in some things, it enhances such efficiency, but of course, now we have to put our security hats on, right? And I think that's where a lot of our conversation was with ourselves this last time. We were just kind of shooting around with it, but a lot of good that AI is doing, a lot of crazy that AI is doing, and it can be used for the benefit of people. It can be used for evil too, right? So I really wanted to kind of open up that can today and really go down and see what you guys are thinking. I know, Clayton, you had a couple things on your mind about how AI being used to actually generate code. What does that kind of look like? What are we seeing some risks there? And of course, Danny, from yourself, I mean, of course, I've used Snyk plenty on the incident response side, on more proactive approach, as well as reactive side to identify, hey, how much can we learn about this vulnerability, right? And Snyk has a great database that I use all the time, but poking around the site and just keeping up with your guys' tech, there's a lot of great things that you guys are doing with AI also. So I really want to hear some more about that. But with that said, I guess where do we start? I mean, I I think maybe the question for you, Danny, since you are obviously in the vulnerability realm, do you notice any major uptick in vulnerabilities? Like, in the past few years, you would get, of course, vulnerabilities being released daily, right?
Hmm.
A lot of these vulnerabilities are being identified by, research groups and whatnot as well. Um, but do you notice, like, the advent of AI, do you notice there's a larger uptick in new vulnerabilities than typical? Are we seeing an influx of stuff come in? And what's your just general thought process?
Well,
Mindset on that.
yeah, there are, and I think kind of two areas. First of all, there's just more vulnerabilities being announced in the CVE database, and I wonder sometimes if that's because the attackers are using AI to find vulnerabilities, so it's dramatically increasing the speed at which vulnerabilities are found.
Sure.
Um, Last year, I think there's a 40% year-over-year growth in the vulnerability. But the other thing that is true is AI is giving us an increased attack surface. And every time you have an increased attack surface, there's more things to attack and more vulnerabilities. So LLMs, for example, people talk now about jailbreaking LLMs and using fuzzy AI and tools to break some of the underlying components. So I think those two things really have dramatically changed the industry. One is the increased attack surface, but then people using AI to find vulnerabilities. Now, as you point out, Cash, on the positive side, on the defensive, we're using AI to help protect and doing that even more securely.
Of
So as
course.
you note, there's pros and cons to AI for sure.
Yeah, I think, and maybe Clayton, if you want to chime in on the other end of it, right? Danny, you did touch, AI is being used maybe by attackers to find more vulnerabilities, but I noticed, Clayton, you also mentioned something interesting too, right? Especially AI is being used to generate code, and it kind of
Yeah,
learns from just code that exists, right? It's learns from whatever it's been fed to it. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the code being fed to it was good code, right? So I don't know, what were your
yeah.
concerns? What's your thought process there?
I'm sensitive to the development security topic because on a lot of the penetration testing that we do, the dev process in general tends to be pretty vulnerable and can give us access to things that are in production even indirectly. So normally that's sort of the soft underbelly is the whole dev team, dev environment, dev process, and pushing code out. That's what piqued my interest, right? Well, we've got you mentioned, Danny, increased attack surface. Obviously, the AI generated code is probably part of that increased surface. How does that actually impact, what things should people really be thinking about in practice when it comes to securing their code, knowing that some of this may either deliberately or inadvertently become AI generated code?
Well, the AI coding assistants, which you mentioned, are generating code faster than ever, and that's a good thing because it's enabling organizations to be more productive. But the LLMs behind those coding assistants, they're being trained on open source permissive code, or that's the assumption anyway. Sometimes people are concerned, by the way, that they're being trained on proprietary code that they shouldn't be. But let's stipulate that it's open source. You're getting the average of all of that code. And of course, that code has vulnerabilities. There was a study released in February of 2025. It was an updated study that said it was Copilot specific, but said that 27% of the code that was generated included a vulnerability. Well, it's to be expected, I suppose, at some level, because you're getting the exact average. In fact, more vulnerabilities perhaps than senior developers, and maybe
Mm,
less vulnerabilities than junior developers, which might tell you maybe we should train only on senior developers code. I don't know. Um,
yeah.
but those coding assistants
Interesting.
do introduce vulnerabilities, and it's important to have guardrails to protect against what is being generated.
How would you advise a customer that is using or has, I would say, a traditional development shop? They start layering in some additional AI generated code. Let's say they're already using Snyk. What would you advise them to do?
Well, I always say security is a multi-layered defense. So first of all, if you're generating code back in the IDE, then you should be using a tool in the IDE that does the inspection real time as you're generating code and will also generate the fix. Like if you use the Snyk IDE plugin, not only will it find the vulnerability, but it will actually generate a fix for you right there in the IDE. But you should be multi-layered. So when you go to do check it in as part of the PR check, you should also do an assessment real time. And that's probably where you should have a security gate. And your gate may be different depending on the application. If it's a critical application, you might say, I want to block all high vulnerabilities. If it's a definitely a critical vulnerability, you may want to block it, but you would have gates in the IDE and the PR check and the build process, and certainly before you get to deployment. And your policies, whether you accept or escalate issues, would be different as it goes through that process. But multi-layered approach is what I always recommend.
No, that makes sense. What do you think's next in that arena? I mean, what do you see on the forefront of threat detection when it comes to software development and development lifecycle?
Well, I think we're going to see a whole lot more understanding between components that are used. Right now, people tend to look at code in two different ways. It's the code that they actually write and create, and code that is within open source component. And they tend to treat them as differently. I actually think that's a bit of an issue, by the way, with AI generated code, because what AI generated code is doing in some ways, it's replacing open source vulnerabilities. And the maintenance of that becomes very, very difficult. So rather than saying, go find a component that will do this, you'll say, write some code that will do it. Well, that's great for today, but 6 months from now, how do you actually patch that custom
Sure.
code? There's no longer an update to the package for it, right?
Yeah.
But what I
Yeah.
think we're going to see is a better understanding of the relationships between the custom code and the open source code and the LLMs and all these different systems. And most vulnerabilities are exposed at the intersection of those different constituents. And you're going to see AI be a whole lot smarter about cross-language, cross-boundary, cross-environment type
Mm,
issues that right now are slipping through the cracks.
that's interesting. Yeah, and I mean, like I noticed especially that's a great point because like you mentioned right now, even on an update. I've noticed, of course, when there's all these open source libraries that are used, right? Every developer uses a made library. Why start from scratch? Why reinvent the wheel on something?
Right.
But the bigger complication I've noticed, of course, when doing just vulnerability review, it's not necessarily the main library, right? Some of these larger libraries, they have nested libraries, and then those nested libraries also have nested libraries. And then it's like that one at the very, very end of the path that's like hasn't been updated for 20 years that just nobody cares to fix because why? It's been working, right? And I don't know, I wonder, just kind of listening to you guys talk, it seems like we need to validate the data that we're training our AI with, and maybe we can use AI to validate the code to ensure that it's good. I don't know, but I agree with you. You know, having AI create you custom code, it just does it on the fly. It may not pump out the same thing twice, right? If you ask it the same question, it may give you different answer the second time. So, yeah, that's interesting. The future of patch management might be a little bit different, right?
Yeah, it's non-deterministic and it leaves us in potentially a worse place because you have greater fragmentation for things that you would rather not have fragmentation for. And one of the challenges that we're facing is AI adoption right now is so fast. These coding generation tools, the adoption is so fast, and we're not always thinking about what's the best way to control them as they're going into place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's kind of the same reason, right? Because a lot of these AI based models that are being leveraged by anybody that's learning how to code AI, right? It's not like they're sitting there coding it from scratch and setting up custom pointer variables everywhere, right? To kind of put this matrix through, but they're essentially using something already made. And if that package that they're using is vulnerable in itself, then now you obviously have a new vulnerable AI tool, right?
Yeah, I do. And I do think we can use AI actually to secure the open source environment, the packages as well. There's an argument to be made we should be going through those and securing those. And I think that's a great idea. Um, but the reason why people typically don't upgrade packages is they're afraid it's going to break the build.
Yeah,
And if you understand the relationships between all the different components and you use AI to do that so that you understand the network of the direct dependencies and the transitive dependencies and all these things,
sure.
then you can actually know, will it break the build if I update from this minor version to this version or from this minor version to this major version? And I think that gives us hope. It leaves us in a place where we have greater confidence that we can completely using agentic AI update a package and not be worried about breaking the software itself.
And I think, maybe this is a good segue. I'm gonna lay it up. Um, Snyk has this really cool technology that I just learned about recently. And I think, as a young developer, when I was doing coding, we use IDEs all the time, and IDEs yell at you when you miss a semicolon. You know what I'm saying? But beyond
Hmm.
that, or if like a function doesn't close properly, you miss an ending bracket, simple things like that, IDEs will yell at you, right? Or if it doesn't compile properly. But I saw something really cool Snyk has brought out, and I'm curious how it works. Is it's yelling at you in the IDE about security vulnerabilities. So it's reviewing your code like dynamically live as you're typing. It's telling you if you're doing it good. That's cool. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that works? Is it a proprietary IDE? Can it bake into any IDE? Like, where is it ingesting? Is it reaching to the cloud and fail checking? Is it local? I don't know. I mean, so many questions, but pick your favorite. Start somewhere.
Yeah, we have an IDE plugin for all the major IDEs: Visual Studio, VS Code, IntelliJ, Eclipse, etc. Um, and it will work with any coding assistant, by the way. We've been talking coding assistants. So if you have a coding assistant in there generating code in real time while you're generating code, we can be doing the security analysis on it. And it's a security analysis in general that we do. So both open source vulnerabilities as well as static application security testing. We're actually using AI. We talked about AI earlier. We're doing symbolic regression analysis to do that analysis. Now, that's a complicated word that it basically means we create a visual representation of the code from source to sink, and then we say, did it, did you do what you were supposed to do? Did you filter the input? Did you encode the output? Um, and we compare it to other app graphs to
Hmm.
say, did you do the right thing? Did you not? So we're using symbolic regression analysis AI to find the vulnerability. And as you say, inline in the code doesn't require a build or anything like that. We can say, hey, you have a vulnerability. Um, Very, very powerful. Even beyond that, Cash, what's exciting is it will generate a fix for you directly in the IDE. So when it finds a vulnerability, it says, hey, you have a vulnerability. By the way, here's 5 different ways that you could fix it. And you can click through and say, I like 1, 2, 3. You hit a button and it will patch it in line within your IDE. So
Wow,
we've come a
that's
long
That's
way.
crazy.
killer.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I mean, I've used those tools where it's like error at line 30, 383, like input validation, and that's kind of all it says. It's like the rest is up to you, man. We're just telling you that something's broken, but
I know, on one hand, I feel like if something was checking my code as I'm writing it, I'd be a little bit self-conscious and nervous. But it sounds great if it can help me fix it as well. So not just calling
We
my
try to
baby ugly.
Yeah, we try to keep the developer in context, in flow. So we don't want them to leave an IDE to go to learn about something. So directly within the IDE. And actually, one of the cool things we've done as well, if you're using Gemini Code Assist, which is Google's version of a code assistant,
sure.
when you ask questions of your coding assistant, it's all trained. The LLM in the background is all trained on Snyk intelligence over how to do the right thing as well. So you can actually have live conversations on, tell me more about this and how do I fix this? And the chat bot itself that is baked in is trained on Snyk intelligence.
That's what you know what this is making me think of. I'm gonna go full nerd on you guys. There's this episode of Silicon Valley. I don't know if you guys have watched that, but they have the two AIs battle each other and it just shuts down the whole
Yeah.
building and city. I just see that. It's like your code's bad. It's like, how about this? It's like, no, it's still bad. How about this one? And then eventually it'll build a bulletproof bulletproof platform, I guess. But that's wild. Do you see Snyk? I mean, you're kind of working with other language models that are building the code to help them fix the code. Do you see maybe Snyk even going down the path of here's our own code building platform instead of just highlighting
Yeah,
security alerts?
maybe. I always say that our goal is to help developers have confidence. We're not trying to replace your IDE or your development environment, and we have fantastic partnerships there. What I do think is interesting is right now they're generating insecure code, which we're testing, and that's two steps. And I'd like to make
Mhm.
that one step. I'd actually like to work with those coding assistants so that what they suggest in the first place is secure rather than having to go through the latency of a couple seconds even to say, hey, here's some code, it's bad, here's a better code. You'd rather have the generation of the code be secure from the very beginning. And so we're in a couple partnerships where we're playing with this idea right now.
Well, that's
That's
awesome.
very
I
cool.
mean, I can't wait
Makes
to
me want
see.
to start coding again if I can get some
Yeah,
help like that. Jeez.
exactly. I was thinking that. I'm like, I just want to get in there and type hello world after all these years and see if I do it right
Yeah.
still.
I wonder if
But
that's a risk though. I mean, you got so much great tooling helping you out. Is those entry level coding jobs of the days of yore, are those going away? And is that a good thing?
I do think entry-level coding jobs are going away. Let me hold off on that. Is it a good thing? The reason I say that is because you can now do what they call vibe coding. You can actually go to a coding assistant and say, I want you to create me a website that has a scrollable table and a form that collects this input. And the coding assistants will go and do that for you. In fact,
Hmm.
Anthropic CEO last week said, well, he said he expected within 6 months that 90% of coding would be done by AI coding assistants. I don't know that it's that high, but I do think we're going to see a world where developers become more prompt engineers than
Mhm.
actual coders, where they're telling the coding assistant what they want and then inspecting the output of that and validating that it
Sure.
all works properly. Is it a good thing is a hard question to answer, Clayton, because you still want someone to understand the full stack from top to bottom. And what you're losing out is that entry level developer who starts at kind of the beginning and over time increments the knowledge. You're losing that kind of full stack understanding of the software. And I go back and forth. I tend to think that in the long run, that's not always a good thing. You want
Yeah,
someone to understand the fundamentals of how it works.
I would think so, right? I mean, your senior developers are that way for a reason because they've ground through all of the knowledge to get there, right? And what happens when you don't have that basis anymore, right? So yeah,
Yeah,
that definitely makes
hopefully
sense.
AI can pick up some of that. I don't know. What I will say is the world is changing so fast. It's literally on a weekly basis. It's moving forward in meaningful steps.
Yeah, I mean that exponential growth rate, I don't remember where we read it. Some people are obviously arguing that we've already achieved singularity. Some people are saying it's like way quicker, right around the corner than we even remotely imagined. But I mean, last time I heard the CEO of Google, he said like almost 25% of Google's code has been generated by AI, which is a staggering number. And that I
Is it
think
that
is,
much, really?
yeah, and that was, I think late last year was his presentation on that. And I mean, the typical rule of thumb is like it doubles every year, right? Technology, right? So this year versus last year's model, I mean, we're on infancy stages of AI right now. I mean, as a technology, it's like a baby. Um, as far as how much people have worked on it. But I don't know. I mean, I think personally, AI is going to be very, very different a year from now, especially since computation has become more affordable, a lot
Hmm.
faster, a lot more powerful. NVIDIA has released that one chip that does 70 teraflops a second, and you can buy that whole encompassing system for a few $100, right? Whereas that much power was going to be in the thousands a year ago. So I think that's going to give the ability to significantly more people to have the ability to start working and leveraging and using AI. So I think the crowdsourcing of the technology is going to increase, right? But yeah, I don't know. It's going to be an interesting year, but I wonder how it's going to work on the security. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more new tools coming out. I'm personally, I really want to jump after our conversation, like you said, Clay. I really want to get in and play with the IDE now and just start using
Yeah, code generation sounds good.
code
Well, you mean
something.
you
Yeah.
mentioned like the security implications. We don't see a lot of great AI tools. They're very specific spot tools to do certain things, but no one
Yeah.
can quite get to a point where like we're automating a pen test. People like to think that you can, but we haven't quite gotten there yet. But maybe we will get a tool at some point that can do a really good job. That an associate or analyst could pull off. But yeah, we'll see.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna
I'm more skeptical of the AGI or singularity or replacing a skilled human pen tester because there's always some, I don't know what it is, the spark in the human side of it that can make leaps that it seems that AI can't do by default. But it will make a lot of the mundane tests so much easier and better, I think, than they are
sure.
today.
Well, I'm interested to see where the future of AI goes, how Snyk is gonna kind of help help us on this side, right? To at least prepare to combat it. I think something you said right now, Clayton, I kind of just immediately slipped my mind. That's usually how that works. But that said, Snyk, we've been using it for a long time to help us at least give manual recommendations, manual suggestions, manual combing, identify CV. So the technologies that you all are working on there at Snyk are awesome. I can't wait to see what else unfolds. I know we're getting close to the end of our episode here for today. Maybe pass it back to you, Danny. Any final thoughts, final words, any new technologies, or a fun plug that you want to give on your end?
Well, we've talked about securing AI generated code, which I think is super interesting. We've talked about using AI within our platform, within IDEs and things I think that is also interesting. But I think one of the most interesting areas for us is securing AI native applications as they begin to emerge.
Mm,
There are whole new techniques around jailbreaking and data poisoning on LLMs and I think that increased attack surface gets very interesting as well as we build new applications. And I imagine this world in the future, software right now is built for a point in time and it doesn't change until the next release of that software. Like if you go to the Salesforce dashboard, you see the dashboard that was created by the developer. I imagine a world in the future where software is real-time composable based on the individual and is generated on the fly by agents. So I go and I say, show me the results from my company from last week. And it gives me a dashboard. And I say, okay, now I want you to drill into this. And rather than that being pre-programmed, an agent is generating it on the fly. And so it's
mm,
it's being backed by these LLMs in this minority report type experience for the person who's interacting with the system. I actually think that's where it gets interesting because the LLM that is backing that type of software will also need to be secured. And there's a whole lot of opportunity for us to make sure that we get it right from the very beginning, as opposed to doing what we've always done in the past, which is bolt on security after the fact. So if you ask me what gets me excited, gets me out of bed in the morning, it's securing AI native applications. That's even more exciting to me.
that sounds awesome. I mean, can't wait to hear more and more about it. And if yeah, I think Matt, last time we spoke, you also have a podcast yourself, do you not?
I do. Yeah, the secure developer. We're selling to lots of developers, and they are always interested in our latest capabilities and techniques within our platform.
Well, that's awesome. We're definitely going to make sure to shout you out in our links that'll be below for all of our listeners there. Make sure you listen to Danny. Check out his podcast. I'm sure you're going to get an amazing amount of knowledge from him. For the rest of us here at Tevora, thanks for always listening in. Danny, thank you so much for coming and chatting with us today about AI existing and the future of. Clayton, any final words from you
Appreciate you
for
having
our
on, Danny.
audience?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Clayton. Thank you, Cash.
Thank you as always. And for our listeners out there, thank you so much for listening to us. Hopefully you enjoyed the conversation today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach us out. If you figure out a way to get a hold of me or Clayton or Danny. I'm sure one of us will send you a thank you card or something. But beyond that, don't forget, like, subscribe, listen in. Danny, we'd love to have you back for a future conversation, maybe at the mid-year mark, and let's see what AI has done by then. But beyond that, thank you again for coming and joining us. Thank you to our listeners. And with that said, till next time.